Good evening. Welcome to Chess Comedy Books 41. I'm going to look at the careers of two ex-world champions, Tao and Petrosyan. Even though they came from very different countries, they were almost compressed into an amorphous blob of Soviet grandmasters. For as much as we were obliged to believe that the Soviet Union was indeed a union. Now, the first book I'm going to look at isn't just one of the best books written about Mikhail Tao, and it isn't just one of the best books written about chess. It's just fantastic. It really is fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, if you get the chance to get this book or even see it, take that chance. It is a collection of games by Tao and also reminiscences and also interviews and insights into the up and down, but mostly up, career of Mikhail Tao. Tao was just like no other world champion. He was completely democratic in his thinking. And if he was able to give you a game, he would. It's as simple as that. People would be queuing and queuing to play him. And he would stay up all night drinking, smoking, and talking and playing chess. This book, which is still in print, I'm pretty certain, shows his record, international record like that. See, in years and wins, losses and draws. He was born in 1936 and he died in 1992. He said he died in Moscow. I thought he died in New York. Isn't that funny? Anyway, sadly, he did pass away some years back. There we are. This was a publishing project which never got finished, and this Complete Games of Tao. It was a Batsford by a very colourful gentleman who's still around, Hilary Thomas. I'm not about to explain about Hilary. The printing in here was a bit crude, bit sort of inelegant. Ugly, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. But the games do have some notes, nothing that will detain you long. And the cost tables are, again, a bit crude. Ones and noughts and heart and little equal signs for the draws. But it has to be said that these books are still very well worth having. Here we have Tao winning the World Championship in 1960 and losing it back against Botvinnik, and up to 1966. He doesn't normally look that square-headed. His career was to flourish again in the 1970s, almost immediately after Fischer went into, I was going to say retirement or exile. He perhaps went into exile inside his own head, but I don't really wish to speculate. Here's an interesting thing, the cross table of 1964 interzonal in Amsterdam. You can see Tao staging a small comeback there. And yet in 1970, in the interzonal, which Fischer was to star, as Fischer did at Stockholm 1960, Tao hadn't even qualified. So, you know, it's a funny system. Here's a comparatively new book. I'll turn it sideways. Study Chess with Tao. I remember running the bookstall at the Basingstoke Congress, and Peter Sauray, who'd won the Open, came up to the bookstall and obviously wanted to give himself a little prize. He certainly got a good prize from the organisers, I don't mind telling you. And so he chose a copy of this. So I often associate Peter, whom I don't know personally, with what is a very good book. Koblenks was presumably one of his Latvian trainers. This is a new edition of the 1980s classic. It's a treasure trove of exciting chess. You bet your boots it is. It's a sort of question and answer system. You see the boxes and they say, why wouldn't you push the pawn forward? Or why did you push the pawn forward, maybe? By hook or by crook. Tolosh was one of those brave, fearless people. He was at his most dangerous when attacking, but also resourceful in defense. Well, if you can say that about Tolosh, then God knows what he'd say about Tao. And here's a game of Tao's against a formidable opponent in the making, the one and only Michael Steen. So there we are, a game from Hastings. I saw Tao play at that tournament in Hastings. It was the first one I went to, Hastings I went to with my father. And Tao won the tournament overall, equal with, I think, Szabo, Gligorich, maybe Timon, I'm not sure. Here we have Tao losing his hair and not losing his temper. Look at the depth of concentration on his face. Look at him, just look at him. Here we are. This will confirm what I said, that the notes, the games are all there, but the notes are slight. But I think they're rather good. And it gives you a flavour of Tao's career because it's got all the games. I came rather late to looking at a player's career from sort of start to finish, and it does give a very much more balanced picture rather than say, Tao was a genius and Morphy was an attacking, because Morphy had to play tedious positions and Tao had to face lost endings. And it is perhaps via this medium, as much as anything, that we learn about the true grit, the steel. There was a game of Capablancas. I know this is irrelevant to this, but it isn't entirely. In Capablanca against Rubinstein, a player whom all his life was very cagey about, I have to tell you, and vice versa. And Rubinstein won a piece very, very early on, move 12 or something, won a minor piece. And Capablanca played on, and although he lost, the game was actually quite involved and interesting. And you would have to conclude at the end that, Capablanca kept the position in perspective. He didn't overreact, but he didn't recoil. And above all, he didn't resign. This is quite a nice little book. Attack with Mikhail Tao. I have to say, I don't know who this gentleman is. This is quite a popular book. It has examples of games played not by Tao. I didn't even realize that, actually. It's a position from Gela Korchnoi. And Kotov Keres. Good Lord. So it's just telling you about how to attack, about what just is. Spassky Petrosyan. So it's really classy examples. Oh, I didn't realize that. I should be more vigilant. Salov Talbot. Well, Salov Talbot. I'll have to have a word with Sean about that. And there we are, Tao, looking fairly young, fairly at ease with himself, which latterly he wasn't really, not really. Now, this is the daddy of them all, for which, of course, I have great affection and in gold. The reason being that I ended up writing a book about Peter Clarke, and he was the author of this. And this is one of Peter's best books. From the era of 60 years ago, nothing quite comes closer than the loving care that Clarke put into his annotations. He told me that he used to spend a whole day analysing a position or a game. And here is a photo of Tao, looking almost like a film star, or maybe he does look like a film star. Sadly, I haven't got this book signed, but I've got everything. But it has the stigmata of Peter Clarke. And if you look at the depth of the, you must remember this has been done far long before databases or computers or high tech or any of those box of tricks. Just look at that, the care he's lavished on it. And Peter was a very great Russian linguist, so he had access to the literature down the ages. And he explains in words of one syllable just exactly what's going on. Here we have Zurich 59 with Tao limbering up to play Botvinnik or whoever was world champion at the time. There we are. I think the book breaks off when Tao became world champion. I'm sure there was pressure on Peter to update the book or to start a completely new one. But unfortunately, very unfortunately, he didn't. Here he is playing Botvinnik in 1960. All Tao's fiery genius, which had thus far in the match been noticeably checked, suddenly broke loose when he made a startling piece sacrifice on his 21st move. Now we would see, would Botvinnik, he was world champion at the time, with his massive qualities of logic and scientific precision, proceed where so many others had failed. How about that for a curtain raiser? And it's just a game of chess. Change of pace, except not. This book remains high on my list of affections. In 1973, I went as a child to the European Team Championships in Bath with my parents and little sister. And it was there that I got this book signed. I gave it to Leonard Barden, who gave it to Peter Clarke, who was there as I don't know why he was there, spectating, I suppose. And here's Petrosyan's signature in Armenian, presumably, and Peter Clarke has signed it underneath. Peter H. Clarke. So this remains a blessed volume. I've got a little confession to make. This is not the original dust cover. I lost the original dust cover. So I bought the book twice and switched the covers. However, the signatures are what counts. Or maybe the annotations are what counts. Like the other one by P.H. Clarke, they are detailed. And I would describe them as businesslike. They don't have flights of humour. Peter doesn't pretend to be funny. So he puts in a lighter touch occasionally. He can be quirky or ironic, as the occasion dictates. And this, like his Tao book, leads up to when Petrosyan became world champion in 1963. One cannot help thinking that the title that Botvinnik held for so long and so honourably would appear to be in safe hands. And those are his words in the book. And I'm not reading from a teleprompter this time. I remembered it. It's 60 games, and it leads up to Botvinnik laying down his king for the last time. He wrote an article, I'll probably come on to that, in Frank Brady's magazine, Chess World, and I didn't really like the tone of it. Botvinnik, who had exploited or been the beneficiary of the return match clause all the way through the 1950s, where he had come and gone from the professional game, and in a way no one was more professional, not even Fischer, than he was, not even Kasparov. And yet he managed to exploit the situation and only or draw a match and be declared the winner, as he did with Bronstein and Smyslov. So as far as I'm concerned, he had done really rather well out of things. After he laid down his king in 1963, he made it clear to the World FIDE, the world governing body, that he wouldn't be playing in the candidates matches I think that's fair enough. He was by then well into his 50s. He was born in 1911, I think, same year as He Never Tired of Telling a Skollenbeck. And he did play some fairly creative stuff right up until 1970 when he retired in Leiden in Holland. So there we are. Petrosyan's Best Games of Chess by P.H. Clarke, published by Bell. You'll also find this as a later reprint by Batsford's with a slightly different title. It's a good book. It's not a great one, but it's consistent and it's good, and I recommend it. Now for something entirely similar. Here we are again with the same guy, but this time it's a book which Vasiliev, which appeared in Armenian, and it was translated by a friend of mine who I saw, I think it was about 2 years ago, in Kingston. We went to see him because he was putting on a little sideshow outside Bentl's. And I mentioned this to him, Michael Basman, and he said, oh, I'd forgotten about that. And it would be nice to think maybe Michael might do in retirement, he might do a bit of translation work. And if he did, where better to start? My God, I paid £20 for this. Where better to start than his native Armenia? This has, like the old books were, plate photographs. Here's Petrosyan. I'm told, I think this is a wild overstatement, and I want it to be a wild overstatement, because he never really wanted to be world champion. He was never happier than when he lost his title against Spassky in 1969. He was certainly a very unusual person in as much that he'd mastered not just the art of chess, but also the art of relaxation, in as much that he could sit at the board and perhaps agree a short draw with, just a young aspirant, shall we say. And this is an example of him looking perhaps at somebody else's game and saying, and yet he's not turning his nose up. He's drinking it in, isn't he? He only lost one game in his long career in the World Team Championships, the Olympiads. And that was against Robert Hubner. I think he lost on time in a reasonable enough position. He was possibly worse, but again. Sadly, this only goes up till 1972. So Petrosyan had lost the World Championship and was no doubt relieved in certain ways, no disrespect, that he didn't have to play Fischer. It was considered in the candidates, and he got all the way to the final. The Petrosyan was the player, the Russian, most likely to stop Bobby in his tracks. And the only way really he could have done that was to frustrate Bobby by going into drawish lines and quiet positions where Fischer might overreach. And there was also the possibility that Bobby's medical state was so bad that he couldn't negotiate the match in any sense in terms of what happened away from the board, or the noises, or the conditions, or the money, or the way the money was generated, or the way the money was split. Fischer had any amount of opinions on any amount of topics. And Petrosyan would have been part of a delegation, obviously he's in charge of it, at the very top. Fischer would have dictated terms as much, if not more, than the Russians, and quite frankly, if they didn't do what Bobby wanted, he would have walked. Anyway, there we are. It's by Vasiliev. It's originally a Batsford. It wasn't reprinted, which perhaps is a bit of a shame. And it does contain quite a lot of biographical information going right back to the time when Petrosyan became an orphan and he had to go outside and shovel the snow. And he would meet Keres the Russians. No one suffered worse, not even in Central Europe, during the war than the Russians, because they had to contend with, as Hitler found out, as Napoleon found out, the dreadful weather in Russia. I sound like I know what I'm talking about in saying that. I'm sure I don't. But the fact remains that this is a book like no other. It really is good, but it's good in a way that it shows the Soviets' opinion of a Soviet, and it's good because it gives a lot of background. The other books I've shown are mostly about the game of chess, but this is about the whole world of chess. You might want the two balanced together, but the fact remains this is a biography and a lovely book. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.